Hey guys, welcome to lesson number 3 of Tutorial Tuesdays. I know that I mentioned last week when we were drawing this sphere that I'd get this finished for you, but as I've been drawing this, I've sort of reached quite a few important milestones that I really wanted to just stress and get across to you. So I did actually do a little bit more on this sphere, but what I'm going to actually show you now, I'm still only using my HB and my 2B pencil. I started a little bit of 2B in this area here. I'm using my tapered stroke again. If this is the first time that you've come across my channel or my tutorials here, I really would stress the importance of going and having a look at lesson 1 and 2. If you actually have a look at the playlist that I'll put a link to above now, it's called Tutorial Tuesdays. All of the lessons are in there. My aim with this tutorial session or this set of videos is to take you through the processes that I've been through over the last 3 years and do some draw-alongs with you, so in real time, as you can see now. But what I've got to the point of now is I'm almost closing in on this hot spot, which is going to be right about here. As we said, the light's coming from the right, but I'm just going to show you now a little bit of the brushing. So I'm actually using this very soft-haired brush, and I'm going to start brushing some of the graphite into that area there, and then I'm going to just show you what we would then do with a kneaded eraser. So this is a kneaded eraser or a putty eraser. You can get these from any art supply, art shop, stationery shop. They're very cheap, and it's almost like a Play-Doh or a blue tack. But what I'm going to show you now is the technique that we've been doing of this layering is I can start to take some of the value out. So I'm just dabbing on now. I've made it into a circular piece of rubber, and I'm just starting to take some of the value out in this lighter area. And like I said, this is the whole purpose of us not using a blending stump or a piece of tissue or in some cases our finger. And now what you can start to see is I've got this lovely contrast between the darkest area around here coming into the lighter areas. So I'm going to take the brush again now, and I'm just going to brush around, and then I'm just going to continue the process. So using my HB pencil, I'm going to start coming in again in the darkest areas, and using my tapered stroke, and I'm just going to keep ramping up the contrast. And what this will do is it will give us the realism. Not pressing on too hard. Always bringing the pencil towards me. Now we can make corrections with the shape of the sphere as we go along. Like I said in last week's video, for the purpose of this tutorial, I'm not too concerned with how perfectly round this circle is, but if you were drawing something that needed to be, you could use a compass or something like that. But as you can start to see now, we're getting some lovely value in. The 2B pencil is still, sorry, the HB pencil that I'm using is still adding value to it. So I've not reached the limit of this pencil's value. And that's a really important lesson, that each pencil you have or that you're using in your set has what we call a range to value. Now if I start lightly and I just keep applying layer after layer, what we find happens is we are able to get a good range from a dark range to a lighter range even within the same pencil. So I don't need to just then jump into my 2B pencil or a 4B pencil. And like we've said in earlier videos, this does take a little bit of a while. It doesn't happen super quickly, but the finished result is a very rich, very realistic, smooth transition from one value to the next. So I'm still working with my HB pencil, I'm bringing value from the darkest side, which is always going to be the side that's furthest away from the light. And as this is a spherical ball, the outer edge here, even though this is on the lighter side, is still going to be darker than the hot spot, which is going to be in this area here. Keeping my pencil moving in a downward stroke as I'm looking at the paper, so I'm starting at the top and pulling down. I'm never scribbling, and as you can see, I just move around the drawing. I don't just fill in one area. I'm trying to balance the drawing the entire time. So I might now come in again with my 2H pencil. And your 2H or a 4H pencil can be used to blend a little bit. So going into the darkest areas and almost covering the whole drawing with your very light pencil, an HB or a 2H or a 4H. One of the tricks when you're drawing, when you're using graphite, is you don't actually want any of your paper to be white. Everything's going to be covered. The only part of your drawing, if you're drawing a portrait that wants to be absolutely white, would be the reflection in the eyes. Apart from that, everything needs to have a value to it, because otherwise it looks totally flat. And we never want to have an area of our drawing looking flat. So I'm still going through this exact same process. I'm working from the darkest areas to the lighter areas, using my tapered stroke and bringing the value into the lightest area on this sphere, whatever we want to call this ball. Making sure that I'm turning my pencil every now and then, every few strokes, just to keep the point nice and sharp. There's nothing worse than having a dull pencil. That's when you need to sharpen it. And as I said, you'll sharpen very rarely if you keep it moving, holding the pencil like we've discussed with the index finger, middle finger and the thumb, rather than coming right down to the point and bearing down on it. So I'm going to start adding a little bit more 2B now to this, and you'll really start to see the contrast ramping up. Like we've said before, because we've already got value down on the page now, we're going to have a lovely smooth application of this 2B pencil. Now you can see that ordinarily a 2B pencil you wouldn't assume as being that dark. I mean, if you compare a 2B to a 9B, they are very, very, very different. But because of the technique that we're using, where we're layering and we're constantly monitoring the contrast, you can see that this area here actually now looks really rather dark, when in reality it isn't that dark. But this is what we're learning to do. We're learning how to make people perceive something that's there when in actuality it really isn't there. And this is why I said, I think it was in last week's lesson, that if you start in the darkest areas and work out the way that we've been doing with this, it's much easier then to get a nice balance and a contrast, and you're not going to end up going too dark in the lightest areas and then have to bring the rest of the darker areas up to meet it so that it looks realistic. What we're doing is we're balancing the dark areas and we're working towards the light areas, and we get a much clearer idea of when our drawing's complete. The thing with this method is you don't have to go all the way through every pencil you have in the darkest areas, because we're constantly balancing and reinforcing the dark areas, going over the light areas with the needed eraser if need be. But because we're not damaging the tooth of the paper by pressing on too hard, either with the pencil or with a blending stump or something like that, if I wanted to, I could rub this whole thing out and start again. And I've seen a lot of people's work where they've pressed on so hard, they make a mistake and they can't actually then rewind. So I'm coming back in now with my HB pencil. I've been on the 2B. I've brought out some value, and whereas this HB pencil looked quite dark a few minutes ago, because I've got the contrast in there now with the 2B pencil, it doesn't actually look so dark. So I'm going to be able to now work much more into this lighting area, this lighted area on the ball with my 2H pencil. I'm not far off from using my brush again. The trick with the brush is making sure that you've got enough value down to then spread it out a little bit, and that means that you're not going to be brushing it too often. You don't want to get into the habit of brushing it too often. It gives it a slightly fake look to it. It almost makes some of your portraits look like a waxwork, too smooth, because if you look at the texture of somebody's skin, it isn't completely smooth. Just fading the value out, constantly looking around my drawing, making sure that I'm filling in any gaps. I'm going to come into my 2H pencil now. And what we always want to try and avoid is these harsh lines. Can you see this harsh line around there? Now I'm going to drag this out with my 2H pencil. This is where you'll see some artists smudging it to get a gradation. We don't want to have a edge to our value on something that's rounded. An edge to value, as we will discuss in later videos, is something we want to separate objects or parts of the body. And I will talk a little bit more about that, but for now we want to make these edges as soft as possible, and we get that by moving up and down the pencil grades and layering. So you can see already now that this edge is starting to soften out a little bit with the application of this 2H pencil. So I might use the brush now again. It's just a soft, you can use a makeup brush for this. You don't need to be going and buying fancy equipment. Camel hair brushes are lovely to use as well, but a little bit more expensive. I would say the most important thing for you to get in terms of equipment is the right paper. Really important you get the right paper. Something that is able to take layers and layers of graphite without it breaking down. I use a Strathmore Bristol. You can get it in a smooth or what we call a vellum surface. Now a vellum surface is a slightly rougher texture to it, and that's very good for drawing realistic portraits. Again, talking about the texture that we get in people's skin, the vellum just adds that little bit more texture to it, and gives you a lovely realistic look. So I'm still using this tapered stroke, reinforcing my darkest areas, fading it out into the lightest areas. Tapered strokes, always tapered strokes, getting this cross-hatching effect. Really important that we learn how to make something look contoured and rounded. Everything we're going to be drawing is going to be working on that principle, whether it's a nose of a dog or the headlights of a car. We don't want anything in our drawings to look flat. And the more you can find opportunities to make things look rounded and contoured by getting a gradation of value from dark to light, the more realistic your drawing is going to look in the end. And it's going to take people a double take sometimes to say, wow, that really is a drawing. And like I've said, in some instances we can make things look more realistic with a drawing than an actual photograph, which I certainly didn't believe was true when I first started drawing, but absolutely it is. So I'm still on my HB pencil here. You can see with these, the pencils that I use are called Caran D'ache, and they're the grafwood version. Each of the pencil grades comes with a different paint job on them, so they represent the value. So you can see the 2B here is a darker finish to the HB, and that makes it easier for you to just quickly pick up and understand, but it just gives you an idea of how dark it's going to look if you apply it the right way. So we know as the direction of light is coming from here, and this is rounded, that this area here is going to be what we call our hot spot. And what we have on every object, and you need to look for this as much as you can, is you're going to have the darkest area and we're going to have the lightest area, and your job is to keep reinforcing those two things. And if you can do that, no matter what you're drawing, you are going to give the viewer the belief that what they're looking at is not something that's flat on the table or on the piece of paper. You're going to give them a feeling that what they're looking at is rounded and contoured. So I'm going to come in with the 2H pencil again now. I'm going to try and soften this edge out like we did previously. Not worrying if I go into the darker areas as well. It's not going to bring the value up in the darker areas too much. All I'm going to really try and do there is just fill out some of the white grain of the paper. I'm trying to fill as much of this tooth of the paper as I possibly can. So we've got as smooth and as rich a tone throughout. So I hope you guys have found the Facebook page. If you're new to this channel or you're new to this tutorial, I would suggest going and having a look at lesson 1. My hope with this series is that we can actually draw along together and then we can see one another's progress. So I've created a secret Facebook page. The information as to how to get involved in that will be at the end of this video. I'd like to see your progress. I'd like to see people's comments and help one another. share some of your work and some of your tips, and just really try and build a bit of a community up as we draw along together. So I'll be releasing videos every Tuesday, tutorial Tuesdays. I'm obviously here in the UK, as you can probably tell by my accent, so I'll be dropping them around about 8 PM GMT. So depending on where you are in the world, you might get to see that and have a go as they launch, or you might have to save it. So if you turn the notifications icon on when you subscribe to the channel, you'll be notified when I drop a new video. But like I say, I'm going to be going for every Tuesday, step by step, trying to make the videos between 25 minutes and 30 minutes long, just so that they're not too time consuming. But like I say, go and have a look on the playlist titled Tutorial Tuesdays, and we will hopefully see you on the Facebook page and seeing some of your progress. Don't rush it, don't try and jump straight into some of the more complicated tutorials and wanting to go straight in and draw a portrait or whatnot. Really do take your time, rewind the videos, pause them, so you can see we're filling out this highlight now with my 2H pencil. Still using my tapered stroke, so I'm going to brush that in now. Quite happy with how that's looking. I'm going to come in with the 2B again now. And like I've said before, this really now starts to lay down very smoothly. And what started life as a flat circle, irregular shaped circle to start with, is now, as I'm sure you can see, is starting to gain some form. And this really is my favourite sort of stage on any drawing. It's when we start laying the HB and the 2B pencil down properly, rather than just filling in white parts of the paper. This is where we now start to mould and contour the piece, and it really does start to jump off the page. The highlights and the darkest areas are the parts of the drawing that bring it to life. So like I say, this is my 2B pencil now. It's much darker. It's not the darkest pencil you're ever going to use, but using this method that we've gone through of working from the darkest areas into the lightest areas means that we've built contrast up, and we can actually make this darkest area here look darker than it really is. I've seen some people just jump straight in with a 9B, which is unnecessary. We can create realism using a very limited range of pencils, and then just saving our darker pencils till the end, just to really bring the depth up in those furthest away areas. Remembering that this edge is still going to be dark around the top here, because the ball is curving away from us. So still bringing that going with my HB now, just smoothing it out, so working along that edge, making sure that we're not creating a very harsh edge. Moving the paper around so I'm always comfortable. My stroke's always pulling towards me. turning my pencil every few strokes so that I'm keeping it nice and sharp. It's self-sharpening. Looking for a smooth transition from the darkest areas into the lightest areas. So I might use the brush on that a little bit now again. And then I'm going to take some value out with my kneaded eraser in that highlighted area. So making sure that I've got a nice rounded edge. And then just dabbing, as you can hear. I'll brush that again. And as you can see, we've got a few marks in there. We can easily correct that. I'll start with the 2H pencil, but we just go back in and we just start to smoothen it out. You can't help but create those blotchy marks sometimes. Obviously, it's just the nature of using a kneaded eraser, but we're very rarely going to be using the kneaded eraser like a normal eraser where we're streaking down the page. Again, that gives a very, very unrealistic look to things. You don't ever see anything in real life that's got big streak marks down it, as though somebody's taken a big eraser and rubbed something out. So this area here just needs a little bit of TLC there. I'll probably come in with the HB on that area as well. So this, like I say, this really is just the start point. This is what I spent many hours practicing a few years ago. I took it on board what the various teachers and online courses and things that I was doing were telling me. And if they said to me that drawing spheres was a fundamental aspect, that was sure as heck what I was going to go and do. So don't try and shortcut it. Go and practice this. I mean, I've drawn hundreds of these. They don't all have to be this size. You can do some smaller, some bigger. Try different pencils, but just train your mind to understand how light works in these areas, getting lighter, getting darker. So it'd be great to see some of your progress and post them on the Facebook page, on the group, sorry. Ask some questions. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. And you're getting hundreds and thousands of these little lines that we learnt at the start in the first lesson. So your drawing at the end of it is going to have millions and hundreds of thousands of these little lines that are going to build up your picture, but they're going to give it a lovely richness. You're making a complex pattern of straight lines. And that was the principle that took me the longest to get my head around, because I came at my art from a direction of scribbling and shading and that forwards and backwards motion. And this is absolutely not that. Like I've said in previous videos, it's almost a cross-hatching, which is building value up with a series of lines going in opposing directions. It's a very complex type of cross-hatching, but it's the best way that we can get some realism and make things look authentic. I'm going to go back in with the 2H now into this lightest spot. Almost becomes very therapeutic when you're at this stage of your drawing and it's layering. You've got it down to an art. You know which pencil to use. You can really switch off and relax the mind. And the hours do slip away. Just conscious of the time of this video, we're up to 26 minutes, so we'll be wrapping this up shortly, because I like to keep these to be down to about 30 minutes, no longer. So I'll give that another final brush. And I just want to show you how much this graphite has moved around the page. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to take the kneaded eraser to the edge. And you'll see actually how much of this value has spread around. Now this is going to come in very handy for us later on when we're drawing white hairs. But you can see as I take my kneaded eraser around the edge of this, actually how much is coming off. So it's important you clean up the edges of your drawing and just keep them clean and graphite free. But as I'm sure you'd agree, we've not done too bad a job of this sphere. I'm going to add a shadow to the bottom of it, just to make it look as though it's sitting on the top of something. There we go. But it's not a bad job. We've got the darkest area here. This is the core shadow. I can reinforce that. I could actually come in with a bit of a 4B pencil on this. So the process of building these layers up, I'm now only onto a 4B pencil, which is amazing to see how much value we've already got into this side of the sphere, considering we're only just hitting the 4B pencil. Same principle, changing the direction of my paper. Okay, so I think that'll do us for today. So thanks so much for watching, guys. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Hit the notifications icon so that you know when a new video is dropping. But if you're here for Tutorial Tuesdays, obviously Tuesdays is the day that the new video is coming out. Don't forget to find the secret Facebook page. It'd be really great to hear how some of you are getting on and see some of your progress. And I'll see you guys in the next video.